Is blaring. Okay. Hello, everyone. It's Michelle here on PR Explored, and I've got a very special, exciting guest today. Gini Dietrich is here. Yay! You were one of the first people I wanted to have on, but I also wanted to kind of get my feet under me a little bit because, you're special. So
I'm not gonna lie, I saw Frank on and I was like, well, I want to be on. What about me?
No,
nothing against Frank, he's great, but I was like,
right.
What about me?
No, I'm really happy you're here, and I know you are a busy person, and I'm just happy to have you. And it was a really good timing because the refresh of the PESO model, and I think this is great to kind of talk to people about that and what's different. They may not have the time or take the time to really walk through. I'm going to put the blog post up that talks about it as we are discussing it today. But first, I asked Gini if she would just tell us a little bit about herself, do her own introduction, if you will. So I'm going to let her do that, and then we'll get into it.
I'm like, should I talk personal and cycling or should I talk business? I guess I should do business. So I'm Gini Dietrich. I founded an agency called Arment Dietrich. And the reason I did that is because I thought that I was going to build this huge global agency and compete with the big guys. And all the big guys have two names, right? Bowen Harris, Fleischman Hillard, Hill and Knowlton. So I was like, well, I'm going to use my married and my maiden names and put them together to create this agency. And as it turns out, I don't really love the idea of managing hundreds of employees. Not really my thing. And through my journey, I also discovered that one of my passions, writing, would allow me to do some things differently in the PR industry. So we started blogging on Spin Sucks, and then I wrote a book, and then we did some online courses. Then we did the PESO Model certification, and now I would call us more like a media/training company for the industry. So I have both businesses right now, which I'm also thinking about how to run two businesses and if that's the right thing to do.
Yeah. I mean, that's, isn't everybody always continually like reevaluating and,
I think you have to, right? Yeah. But before we get started, I think that there's something very important that we should talk about first as well. You have a new book out, which is amazing. Congratulations.
Yay. Thank you. That's very kind. And of course, I talk about the PESO model in the book.
Awesome.
With credit, always
right.
With credit.
Let's not go down that poor road.
But yes, we and you are very gracious about, I have the slide in my talks, and I just think it's a great framework.
Right.
For my own brain to wrap around, and then also for me to like explain it to clients, even if I don't show them the picture, it just kind of, I think, a client will say, well, we just want to be, in the Wall Street Journal, or I'm like, well, there's a little bit more about it, a little bit more to it. So anyway, that's why I play off the PESO model. I leverage it, I use it, whatever you want to say. But I mean, yes, it's really important for us to have, because I feel like the terminology in what we do can be all over the place. And even now I'm seeing new terms. I saw journofluencer or something a couple of weeks ago. And yesterday I saw something else. I forget even what it was now, but it's like, we get into all these labels, I think.
Yeah. It's funny you say that, because I just finished Kara Swisher's new book, Burn Book. And just this morning I finished it. And she talks about, first of all, she does the journey of like her journey from the early 90s through today. And when she talks about where she is today and, building conferences and the podcast and all of that kind of stuff, she says, I'm sort of a reporter entrepreneur, reporter. So she's trying to figure out how to combine those two. So it's funny you say that, because I think we as humans try to combine journalfluencer, like, really? Okay.
Well, that's the thing that I can't get over is that journalists have always been influential, right? Even before the
Right.
term influencer was
Yes.
ever out there. When I worked at an agency
Yes. Yes.
years ago out in the Bay Area, where I probably pitched Kara Swisher, by the way. I mean, I've been
Probably.
following her
Yeah.
that long. We had what we called an influence, like a top 20 influencer list, and some of them were
Sure.
journalists, some of them were analysts, and other people in the industry for Adobe. This was for Adobe at the time, and so even then, I was like, well, that's that. So sometimes when I hear influencer marketing or journalists as influencers, I'm like, yes, of course, they're very
Of course.
influential. So
Right. They're the OG.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, anyway, we've
Well,
probably given people.
congratulations on your book. I think that's really exciting.
Oh, thank you. It's been years in the making, right? And I mean, like I was just telling you before we went on, I finished writing at the end of May. So the fact that it's actually out is just like,
Yeah, almost a year.
woo.
That's crazy.
I know.
Crazy.
It really is a book baby. So
Yeah.
I am going to put up, as we are discussing the refreshed PESO model. I'm not going to call it revised, it's refreshed. That's the word. Do you want to walk us through a little bit? I read the blog post and I've looked at the image, but maybe we can walk through just a little bit of what's changed or what the biggest changes that how you view that. Like, what do you think are the biggest changes?
Sure. So a couple of things. One is that when we first launched it, it was really, really tactical. And we listed tools and tactics. So we like the very first iteration had Google Plus and Vine on there. It no longer exists, right? So when we revised it in 2020, we looked at it and we said, okay, it's kind of stupid to list tools since those come and go. Let's do it more focused on the types of things that you would do under each media type. And then fast forward to this year, what we really wanted to do is focus it on outcomes versus the outputs. And I think one of the biggest challenges that communicators have in general is measuring our work. And we tend to measure the outputs instead of the outcomes. So the big focus has been on, if you're using earned media, what's the outcome of that? It's to build credibility. If you're using paid media, the outcome of that is to grow your reach. So we focused that at a really high level. And then we also have the really detailed one for, new business meetings when a prospect is like, well, we really just want to get in TechCrunch. And you're like, okay, let me show you how this actually works. And you throw that up on the screen and they go, oh, right? You see them.
Right.
Yeah. So we still have the really detailed one for that purpose. And also, for brainstorming and, people will say to me, well, where does employee comms live? And where does investor relations live? So we tried to encompass all of that. And we also included some AI in there too.
Yes, we know that's going to be a thing. Well, no matter how we feel about it, we know it's going to be.
That's right. You're exactly right.
And we do have feelings about it. So.
Yes, we do.
So the new model is at the URL. Is that the right URL that I put up there so people can reference it? I wanted to, maybe we can bring up the picture. Yeah, here it is. Oh, there it is. Yeah. Oh, I don't know if I can do this right now. Anyway,
yeah, that's correct.
You go to the URL and you
Meg's
can see
there.
the picture. Let's talk a little bit about, I know the answer to this question, but what is your favorite of the 4 types of media? Which one is your favorite?
Owned media, of course.
And I mean, I think it's really important, and I think it's often overlooked. I think it's the foundation. It gives you a lot to work with, and if you don't have it, it's really hard to prop up the rest of what you're trying to do. However, I see a lot of companies potentially kind of neglecting it, and I mean, I have theories as to why. I mean, not easy to create great content. It's expensive sometimes.
It takes a long time.
Yep.
Yep.
So, but let's talk a little bit about, why is this so important in your view?
So this is what I believe. And I'm going to caveat this with, it depends on the organization's goals. Like, there will be times, of course, there's something else that you would start with something else. But for most organizations, you want to start with owned media because you need to have a foundation for which you can start to use the other media types. If you don't have content, you have nothing to distribute on shared. You have nothing to prove to a journalist through earned that you have the expertise and experience that you claim to have, and you have nothing to boost on with paid. So you certainly can do each of those without content, but it becomes a lot more challenging. It becomes a lot more challenging from an earned media perspective because the world of media relations has changed so dramatically in the last 4 months that it's becoming even harder and harder and harder, right, to get their attention. So if they can't go to your website or go to your social media, sometimes in the middle of the night, to see what, kind of source you would be, then they're going to go to your competitor. So that's one of the most important things that you can do. It builds your thought leadership. It builds your expertise. It builds your experience. Those things build your search engine optimization. Like, it all starts to work together. So that's why I believe that you start with own, because then you have it as your hub to use the other media types.
Right. But it's so hard to get, I think, sometimes to convince them that they
It
need to do
is. It is. Yeah, it is. And I think so normally what we do especially with a new client that doesn't have a content library, is we say, give us 90 days. And we start to build their library, and we do things that feel good to the executive so that we kind of stroke their egos a little bit, but then also show results, right? Because content's pretty easy to measure. You know whether or not somebody's watching, listening, reading it. You know if it's being shared. You know if people are engaging with it. And you know that pretty quickly. Now, is it measurable to results, to sales? Not yet, but it starts to get you there. So we always say, give us 90 days and let us show you how this works and how it all works together. And typically most executives will give you that time to let you show them how it works.
Well, since you said that, I wasn't going to ask this next, but how important is it to pick the right clients? Because when they don't think like that, it's really hard to help them, right? I mean, it can be a struggle. It's an uphill battle all the way.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure you've had this experience too, but over the years, I've learned what my red flags are. And, if somebody comes to us and says, we're looking for a PR firm, my very first question is, tell me what you want the PR firm to do, because it's usually media relations. And then it's easy for me to say, before I have any emotion involved, easy for me to say, that's not what we do. And usually they'll say, well, what do you do? And I explain the PESO model, and they either do one of two things. They say, oh, wow, that's way too much for us. We're not there yet. Or, actually, this sounds really interesting. Can you tell us more? And so they sort of weed themselves out, which is nice. And then, this is interesting. Can you tell us more? You can go down that path of educating them and helping them understand. And usually you can tell by the questions they're asking or the answers that you're getting that they're going to be a good client or not.
Right. It's just amazing. When you start thinking about it that way, at least for me, I mean, it just changed. It totally changed everything, because it was more like, well, and to be fair, some companies aren't ready for everything.
Absolutely.
They're not ready.
Yes.
I mean,
Right.
for example, startups. I mean, I used to work a lot with startups because I started out in Silicon Valley and there were a lot of startups. I mean, there's still startups in the Midwest, but they don't have the same funding. So, I mean, I kind of stopped working as much with them for that reason, but then I really decided, even today, it's hard. It's just hard when they sometimes they don't have enough to work with. They don't maybe have the experienced leadership, and they don't have the customers, and they don't, there's a lot of things that they need to kind of have in place, I think, for it to be really effective. They're not to say there's nothing you could do, but I'm pretty if somebody from a startup calls me, I will be pretty honest about that, and we'll just talk about it.
Yeah, I think that's smart. I also think there's a sophistication level that comes with it, right? Because if you have an executive team and a company that is doing pretty well, I'd say 30 to 70 million dollars in revenue, doing pretty well, but they haven't ever done any true marketing or communications, that's a red flag, right? Like that means that they are focused solely on sales. And you can ask those types of questions. How are you getting leads now? How are you converting leads into clients? Like ask those kinds of questions to help you understand how sophisticated they are, because a fully integrated PESO model program, even if you're slowly dripping it out, you're starting with owned and then you go to shared and then you go to earn and then you go to paid and it takes you 2 years, it's still pretty sophisticated. So you have to understand, to your point, are they ready for this? Do they have the leadership who's ready for this? If you're going to start creating thought leadership for the CEO and it starts to attract reporters or other influencers, can they have those conversations?
Yeah.
Maybe not.
Right. And it's the long haul. You mentioned years. I mean, that would scare some. That's the other thing. I feel like sometimes they just expect you to, they've never done any real outreach or earned media or thought leadership. They expect results like overnight. And I'm like, well,
it's not how it works.
Yeah, no, they've never heard of you. You've been around for a while, but nobody's heard of you. So you can't expect them to immediately like respond to an email or a pitch or whatever if they've never heard of you. Like, so it's really, I feel like it just empowers you on your side of the fence, because it's like they understand, because I used to think, it's, I don't, it's me. It's not them, it's me. But no, it is, you do have to have that conversation, because it's not always the PR person's fault if something doesn't go wrong. It might be their fault if they didn't ask the right questions, though. So that's why I think.
Or communicate expectations. Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
So let's see. So the 4 types of media. Do you need to focus on all of them? Why or why not? Why is it important?
Eventually, yes, but I don't think you have to start out that way. I think if you went into an organization either as an agency or a new employee and you said, we're going to implement the PESO model, and you tried to do all 4 at once, you would fail. So like we were talking about, if the organization doesn't have a content library yet, that's a great place to start. If they don't have relationships with journalists and influencers yet, that's a great place to start to get your feet wet. If they don't have any social media or they started it and stopped, like I was looking at a prospect's social media channels last night, and the last time they did anything on any social media was 2021. And I'm like, what is going on here? Like, and I think that's pretty typical. So eventually you do want to implement it all, because where the real magic comes is when all 4 are working together. But I don't think that's realistic. So depending on what the goals are and what's missing is where you'll start. So you'll start to we have one client that we started with a year ago, and we just started creating content. We launched a podcast for them. The CEO is the host. It was really terrible at first. And every week I spent time with him saying, here's what you should focus on next week. And I gave him one thing to focus on for the following week. And a year later, he's great at it. It was not the case in the beginning. But because he's so involved, he feels like we're making progress, and he sees his own progress, right? And we're taking those podcasts and we're creating blog posts, and we're developing longer form content, and we're developing relationships with the guests, and then we're using social media and tagging them. So we're doing all those things. We introduced paid media like 9 months in, and we haven't even started earn yet, and we're 15 months in right now. So it depends on what's needed and how you have to build. And this particular organization was not sophisticated at all. They had never done any marketing or communication. So I knew we had to sort of tiptoe in.
The social media thing is crazy to me, though. It's like, first of all, don't even get started on 10 different social media channels if you're not going to be able to be consistent.
Right.
Start with
Right.
1 or 2. Like if you're in
One or two.
B2B,
Yes.
LinkedIn, right? Start
Yeah.
with LinkedIn, and
Yep.
that's the most important one
Yep.
probably for B2B,
Yep.
and then maybe, branch out, but don't go out try to go all in on all of them if you're
Yeah.
not if you really don't think you
Yeah.
can commit because
And my favorite question is, should we get on TikTok? Probably not, unless, especially from a B2B perspective. No.
No, I
No.
know. I feel the same way about, like, Instagram for B2B. I mean,
Yeah.
it can be okay, but, like, a lot of companies just don't have a lot of visuals. I mean, they don't have anybody in there taking pictures and video that
That's
they
right.
can
That's
share.
right.
So
That's
if you
exactly right.
don't have anything really, that's a fit, and then again, like if you can't keep up with it, it just gets overwhelming and you don't do anything. Then when somebody goes out and searches for you, including a journalist, by the way, and sees that you haven't posted anything for 6 months
3
or a year,
years.
they're like,
Yeah.
"Is this
Right.
company still around? Like,
Yeah.
what's going
Yeah.
on?"
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Creates
Side
confusion.
note, I laughed out loud. I want to laugh out loud at Michelle. Will you do an audiobook for your book?
It's too soon for that, like, it's too
It's
soon for that
yeah.
question.
Yeah.
It
It's
hasn't
way too soon.
been
It's
out a week.
overwhelming. There's so much to do. I
Oh,
told
yeah.
Michelle before we started recording that writing the book is the easy part. It's the marketing and promoting it that's the hard part. Whew, and that's where you are right now.
And even for those of us who are in the biz, it's like, I mean, I don't know, but talking about, yourself and your book and it gets I mean, I'm I think it's a little taxing at times, like, it's okay.
It is. It is. Yeah, it is.
Anyway, we're not here to talk about that today. But
Audiobook is coming someday.
yeah. At some point, maybe we'll see. Okay, so you wrote a post about comments that I just
Oh, yeah.
thought was very insightful, and I want to talk about that a little bit because I feel like that's a really easy, like a low bar to jump in, and you can do that right away on LinkedIn, for example. You can go right in there, and you don't necessarily have to be following or connected or like you can comment now on
Right.
anybody's
Right.
post.
Right. Yeah. Um, so commenting used to be a really big thing, right? Like people would comment on blogs, people were engaging on Twitter, people were commenting on business Facebook pages, and that all sort of went away, I would say 2016-ish. And I think for a couple of reasons. I think number one, there was so much of it happening that I think bosses were like, are you doing your job or are you commenting on, right? Because there was so much of it going on. And because it was public facing, there was a lot of the cancel culture kind of things happening, even at micro levels of like, you said this and then you regret what you've said because it's 3 years later and you've learned and you've evolved, right? So I think those are the two reasons. So everybody sort of went back to, we're still going to comment and engage, but it's going to be in private social media. Slack became a big deal. WhatsApp, Discord, like there are places now that you can do that. And now what we're seeing is sort of a nice balance of the two, where
Mhm.
to your point, you can easily go into LinkedIn and if somebody's produced some content that really speaks to you, just leave a nice comment. But also we actually included commenting in the earned media portion of the PESO model this year because it allows you to build relationships with journalists and influencers really easily. Because if you're commenting on their content and you're consistent about it, they start to go, who is this person? And they investigate, right? They go and they click on your name and they go to your LinkedIn profile. They look at what you're doing. They look at your company. They look at who you're connected with, and they start to do their own research so that by the time you pitch them a story, they already know who you are and that ice has been broken. So to your point earlier, without that kind of stuff, they don't know who you are. They don't know if you're in business. They don't know anything about your business. But if you're leaving thoughtful comments on their content, it allows you to build that relationship pretty fast.
Yeah, and you don't make it all about you.
Right.
You're talking
Right. Right.
about
Right.
their work and you're
Right.
not gonna plug your stuff
Right.
and your
Right.
comments. That's a
Right.
thing I see people do sometimes that I think is
Yeah.
not a good idea, but I really think this is a very smart idea. And I think it's like it's not rocket science necessarily, but like it's an easy, way to kind of get started and kind of start to get on their radar because
Yeah.
I think you've also talked about, and I agree that, if you see somebody's name in your inbox pop up and you recognize their name, you're more likely to at least read what they sent you. Maybe you
Yep.
won't,
Absolutely.
maybe, yeah, if it's a pitch and maybe it doesn't land, but at least they read it, maybe respond or keep it for later or something like that. So,
Yeah. Absolutely.
because that's a battle. I mean, right? Just getting them
It
to, I
is.
was
It is.
posting on, I'm not on Twitter as much as I used to be, but I was over there yesterday and we were going back and forth about just, it's not figuring out the right contact. It's getting them to read the pitch. And I
Right.
said, well, yes, but if you're sending it to the wrong person, there's
Fair. Yeah.
zero
Yeah. Yeah.
chance, right? But
Yeah.
I mean,
Right.
yes, that is also an issue now because I think either it's getting filtered out or they just get so many and they just, it's a thing. So.
I mean, think about your own inbox. Like, I can't keep up, and I'm not a journalist. I don't know how they do it. I cannot keep up.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense to me. And even,
Right.
all the, thoughtfulness in the world when writing your pitch, if they don't read it, I mean,
Right. Right.
it's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
so there's a lot to it. I just think it's getting more challenging. So I think it's really important to stop and think and figure out, an approach that will work because it's not like, pulling a media list from a database and spamming out this, poorly written pitch that to people that never wrote about bath bombs or whatever it is. I'm like, this
Yes.
isn't gonna this I don't know that it ever worked and it really won't work now. So
Right.
like
Right.
you better stop and think, get some help or I don't know.
Yes.
But
Yeah. So I think you're right. There's some things like commenting that will gain you some respect and attention pretty quickly. Don't say things like this article was great. Like that's not going to do it, right? You have to be thoughtful about it. And please don't use AI to write your comment because you can, as the author, you can tell. And I have like 4 people who comment on everything that I publish, and I can tell that they are not writing the comments. They are having a robot do it.
yeah.
So I guess if you use AI to write your comment, okay, please make it sound like it's coming from a human. So revise it, edit it.
It's probably just easier to write it in the first place is my thinking and like I don't
Probably.
know, but I see LinkedIn, have you seen this? Has a suggestion like when you go in to write your post use AI to write your I'm like, no, no, no. LinkedIn, do you know me? Like I'm never gonna use that. Like it's never gonna
Although, just to screw with a girlfriend of mine, I always use it. So she
Oh
publishes stuff, and I'll push the button. Like she published something the other day about Anne Handley helping her with something, and the AI said one of the prompts was who is Anne Handley. So I pushed that button and left the comment. Like, I know who Anne Handley is. I was just being a smartass. Yes.
don't do that.
Don't
No.
do that.
But yeah, and
Don't be me.
reporters know too. And like
Yeah.
I've had this discussion a lot lately too about you know, for a long time I think journalists have been emailing questions for clients to answer, right? But now some clients are using AI to craft the answers and journalists know the difference. So that's
Yep.
another issue that I've been discussing and trying to figure out like I mean my clients don't do that because I won't do that or will let them do that. And I know, like, I can tell, and I'm usually working with them on it, so I know. But I just feel like journalists may insist on like a live phone call or Zoom or something instead of doing, an interview by email, which I kind of want to argue is better anyway. But
I
you
would
know,
argue that too. Yeah, I mean, we're all sucked for time, which I get. But I personally don't think there's anything wrong with using AI for a first draft of your answers if that's what you want, if that's going to help you get sort of, because some people have trouble staring at a blank sheet of paper. Like that's real. I don't think that's any different than speaking an answer or answering a question into a voice memo and sending it to your PR person and letting your PR person massage it, right? I don't think it's any different than that kind of
right.
stuff. But it's not the end point. You can use it as a starting point, but you
Right.
have to then go in and make sure you agree with it, and it sounds like you, and it sounds like something you would say. It has to be edited, all of those kinds of things. So it's a starting point.
Yeah, it's another thing we're gonna have to
Yeah.
grapple with because, nobody thought through these things before they unleashed the AI tools out there. So I'm like, okay. Hmm. Anyway, like we don't have enough challenges. But another point that you have in the PESO model that I think you feel is important, and you can tell me no if not, is community. And I feel like it's not a new, not a new one, but I feel like that in this age of, robots and fake news and blah, 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 I feel like the real human, the community aspect is just growing in importance.
Yeah, and I don't think community works for every organization. There has to be something that people can rally around,
Okay.
that makes it effective. So do I think like an OEM manufacturer should have a community? Probably not. Do I think that Crest toothpaste should have a community? Probably not. But if you have a rallying cry that will engage people, nonprofits probably can do a really good job with community. The PR industry has a couple of communities that are really well run and engaged. So if there's something, so industry wide or vertical wide, you can, but when you have community, that it's important to let people be themselves and to engage in ways that's comfortable for them. So if you're trying to dictate, well, you can do this and you can't do that, and it doesn't work. So it's very much, certainly you want to make sure, there's no hate speech and all those kinds of things happening, but from a monitoring perspective, but you don't want to put thumb screws on people and say, you can't do this and you can't do that. Like the SpinSucks community is really engaged, and it's really robust. And part of it's because I know certain buttons to push, which I think helps, but also we let people be themselves, right? And we're encouraging and we're thoughtful. And so those things help. If there's like I said, if there's a rallying cry, but if you're an OEM manufacturer and there's nothing to rally people around, it's something I think you could skip.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like though for every company, there are people out there who are kind of your fans and followers. People
Absolutely.
that are
Loyalists and
loyal.
advocates.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
then
Yeah.
those are the people that you really can, leverage in good times and bad. And
Yep.
again, I
Yep.
don't think it's a new element, but I do think I feel like anybody can say anything these days and people sometimes believe it. And so it's just really important to, first of all, be credible, but then surround yourself with people that will support you and, you know, add to your credibility versus, people that will take away from it or organizations that may harm it in some way. So,
Yeah. And I think, it used to be that very few organizations would have a crisis. And very few you would have a crisis because of a natural disaster or a plant explosion or the death of an executive. Like there would be certain things that would happen, and it wouldn't happen to every organization. But today we're in a world where every organization will have at least one crisis. And so when you have a group of people who are advocates and loyal to your business, and you reward that and you engage with those people when you're in a crisis, they will protect you and they will do what they can to help you. So it's important from that perspective too. It didn't used to be that important, but every single organization will have at least one crisis
yeah.
throughout its lifetime.
I used to talk about that when I would be meeting with a prospective client, and they would look at me like I was nuts, like crisis, like crisis plan, like we don't need that. And now I'm like,
Yes, you
hey,
do.
yeah, I mean, it could be anything. Like I've seen all kinds of things, and there are things that you wouldn't necessarily maybe view as a crisis or anticipate would happen to your company, but man, like I mean, it's just a crazy world, and anything can happen. So
yeah. I mean, somebody can manufacture a video that's not even relevant just because they're mad at you, and it's not even true, and it can go and create
yeah,
something for you that is going to make your life miserable.
Right. That's when you need that army of, fans and
That's
credible
right.
folks
That's
around to
right.
kind of
That's right.
bolster you up a little bit. So
Yep.
they're handy in all kinds of situations. So
Yeah.
I say
I'm a
work on
fan.
that. Yeah, Anyway,
Uh-huh.
so let's talk about. I know we. I mean, of course, I love earned media. I love owned media and earned media, but earned media. So beyond, we know that the pool of media is shrinking, right? The outlets are kind of either laying people off or going away entirely, and so as that evolves, and of course, this has been happening for a long time, but we see it, like really happening now, and there are all kinds of reasons, and we talk about that all day too. But outside of what you would call traditional journalists, what are some other, places that people could pitch, like newsletters, for example?
Newsletters is a great example. Substack and Medium have a nice list of places that you could pitch. That's a really good example. The TikTok news anchor, which whether or not you agree with, is happening, that their people are out there, just regular people that are reporting on the news. Those are places to pitch. I think you can look at micro, and everybody knows the macro, the big, huge influencers, right? I think you can look at micro influencers, people who are influential in your industry, and every single industry has, a handful of people that are influential. I think you can look at those kinds of people. But anybody who is talking about the industry or a group of organizations that you might belong to,
Mhm.
whether or not they have 100 followers or 10,000, those people are influential in their own ways. And so as we think about how we're shifting our thinking around traditional media relations and thinking about who are the people that are influencing the people that we want to connect with and the people that will buy from us. And that's where you should be spending your time.
Mhm. So yeah, so your list is not just confined to, again, something you're gonna churn out from a media database and then just, like not do any legwork or
Right.
work or,
Right. Right. Yeah,
research.
you might have podcast hosts, newsletter writers. I mean, there's all sorts of YouTube influencers. Like, there's all sorts of places that you should be looking.
Yeah. Yeah. What else? What else do you want to touch on? What's on your mind as far as the revamped model?
I think the biggest thing is the measurement piece. That's our biggest challenge. And I will tell you that, in my own journey of being an agency owner and working with clients and measuring the work, it has become increasingly more clear that executives appreciate what I would call the top of the funnel stuff, the content, the social media, even the media relations. But what they really want to know is how that work is affecting the growth of the business. And
Mhm.
so much of what we do is brand building and reputation management and, doing all of the things that protect the organization and attract new audiences. But
Mhm.
it's really challenging to say, we had 500 new people come to the website on April 25th and 300 of them became customers. It's really challenging for us to do that. But that's what executives expect, because marketing can do it and advertising can do it. So when we look at the PESO model, we look at how do we measure the outcomes. So one of my favorite tools right now is Coverage Impact,
Mhm.
and
Okay.
it's a free tool from Coverage Book.
Oh, I was gonna say I love Coverage Book. Yeah.
Yeah. So what they did is they allowed you, at first what they were doing was allowing you to export your Coverage Book placements, everything that you had in your Coverage Book, and import it into this software. Now they're letting anybody, whether or not you're a Coverage Book customer. But as an example, you can take your spreadsheet of media placements over the last month, over the last quarter, over the last year, however long you want, and upload it into Coverage Impact. And then you can go and say, okay, I want to compare this to website traffic. I want to compare it to stock pricing, our stock price. I want to compare it to leads generated. I want to compare it to sales revenue generated. I want to compare it to number of volunteers. donations. Like there's lots of options. So you say, let's say you want to compare it to website traffic. So you go into your Google Analytics, you export a CSV file for the same time period, and you upload that in, and then it overlays. So you have, let's say you have all of 2023 in there, and you have spikes of media placements in January, in April, in October, and November.
Mhm.
And you can see when you overlay the Google Analytics that you also had spikes in traffic in January, April, October, and November. But so it lets you correlate that, right? But then it also shows that we had a spike in traffic in January, we had a spike in traffic in April around the media placements. But the traffic actually never went back to pre-January numbers. It stayed pretty high in May through November, which says, okay, we can correlate our media relations efforts to this increased website traffic. And oh, look, we had another increase in November and another increase in December. And then the numbers continue to rise. So it allows you to look at measurement in a different way, in a way that I think executives expect, because now you're not saying, well, we had 5 billion media impressions and our advertising equivalency was $222 million. Like those numbers don't mean anything. But when you can correlate your activity with results, that's where it starts to make some difference.
Yeah, I think sometimes the challenge is getting the data, the Google Analytics, because I don't always have access to that. So I think that's part of the discussion when you set the client up at the beginning of the engagement.
We put it in our contract.
It's that you have to have access, because otherwise, how can you measure? Like I know Jonna Burke, and the thing that she talked about when I interviewed her once was about how PR ladders up. So, you can't just look at it in a vacuum. It's like it's part of marketing and it's part of everything else that you're doing. So it is really hard to measure, because the question comes up all the time, and I think we have struggled with it forever, and I think we are still struggling. So I'm excited that there is going to be something maybe that will help us. So.
Yeah, I'm really impressed with it, and I keep playing with it. I'm like, can we include some of the other PESO model types in there so that we can? And so actually, Gary Preston, who's the CEO, has been working with me on it, and so we're looking at how we can start to implement other media types as well.
Yeah, I'm thinking about asking him to be here and
chat. Oh, he's great. You should absolutely. He'd be a great guest. Definitely do that.
Paging Gary.
He's awesome. Plus, he has the nice accent, so he sounds good.
Who doesn't like that?
Right.
Yeah, no, I think people avoid talking about measurement, but it's clients, they want it. And so then it's our responsibility, and it helps us too, if we can provide them that information, and we can know what's working and what isn't working as well. And, the fact that tool is free too. I mean, I have a coverage book subscription, but I mean, that tool is free.
Yeah. It's totally free.
And I'm not the biggest on, buying the newest shiny object tool of the day, but I do think coverage book is worth it. I mean, it's
every penny. I love that.
I don't know how
I don't know either, but when you hand that over to an executive, they're very happy. They're like, oh, that's really nice. Thank you.
Yeah. We do have a couple of questions. I don't know. I mean,
other than, will you do an audiobook for your book?
Yeah, no, he's asking if you're on the marketing side or if you work as a publicist. I mean, I think, all of the above. Like, I mean, you're the head of your firm. So, I mean, but you have your finger in so many things that, I mean, and the PESO model covers a lot of ground. So. Yeah.
I mean, because of the PESO model, depending on the organization, some consider it communications and some consider it marketing. But I'm a PR professional through and through. That's how I grew up. But I have, as I've started to do this work over the last decade, I probably touch more marketing than communications.
Yeah. It's really the best of all worlds, because, it's if you hire Jenny, then you get all of it.
You get all of it.
You don't need, having a separate, agency for PR and market, they
Yeah,
kind of cover it
yeah,
all. So
yeah.
really. We don't have other questions. What else do you want to talk about? Is there anything else you want to talk about before we wrap up?
What is your plan for marketing your book?
We're asking you the questions.
You asked me what I want to talk about.
Oh, well, no, I mean, I have spent years kind of building a network of people, and that's why I feel like community and followers and just friends, I would call them as much as anything,
Yeah.
is so important. And when I was doing it, I never really thought, oh, I'm going to write a book someday. Like that wasn't really the idea.
Sure. Yeah.
But I think it's like about thinking about the other person, and just as you build any kind of a network or community, I think it's being thinking of them and what you can do for them or how you can help them. And then and it's again not a self-serving type of approach, but in the end it helps you as well. So I do think that is helping me a lot. And as far as plans, I mean, I'm probably going to roll some courses out is one thing I'm
Good for
thinking.
you. That's great.
So yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
Do
so
that. Yes.
I'm trying to figure out the best tool for that, because again, like, oh boy, because I'm looking at Kajabi. That's the one that I keep
That's what I
hearing
use. Yeah.
a lot about. So
Yeah, that's what we use.
yeah,
It's so easy. It's
is it?
plug and play. Yeah, it's really easy.
Well, people say it's more expensive, and I'm like, yeah, but look what you get. Like, I'm not one again. That's hard to use. I probably won't do that. So
yeah, it's super easy to use. It might be more expensive, but you're going to save a ton of time.
that's money. Time is money.
Right.
And yeah, none of us
Yeah.
has, hours and hours. Like, I get frustrated trying to figure out how to use tools. And I see the same thing with clients. I'm like, I'll start talking to a prospective client, or I'll start working with a new client, and they have these expensive, subscriptions to databases and things. And I'm like, they don't even know how to log in, let alone like they're not using it. And I'm like, you could take that money and you could use it on somebody like a consultant or an agency to help you. I mean, that would probably be a better use of your money than to just be sinking it into expensive tools that you're not using. So
absolutely. Yes.
that's another thing that I talk about, a lot, because, and I know some people love their tools, but I'm like, and that's great. I mean, like I said, I have tools that I love too, but I just don't, I think we have an over reliance on the tools versus the strategy or the thinking behind, like, what do you want to do and how you're going to accomplish it? And then, you got to start there. Where's your audience, spending time. So just things like that, basics. I mean, and that's, to me, that's why I love PESO, because it just kind of lays out, in a very clear picture, which, we're all visual people. I mean, it's really helpful to put that up there. And I have heard people like almost go just gasp, or like, oh, like, it's like an aha
I mean,
moment.
you literally see them go, oh, it's great. I get it now.
Yeah, because otherwise you could talk all day and they're just not seeing it, they're just not, until you show them. And that's why I think it's so important. And I really am happy to see, the update, but it's a cornerstone, I think, for a lot of us in PR. So we really appreciate everything that you do with that. And, we appreciate that you're so generous with your time. And of course, you have a community, the Spin Slacks community, that is free for PR people to join. And you have a newsletter, you have a blog. I always recommend following you on LinkedIn, because you're always sharing everything that you write about on there. And that's always good stuff. And so definitely.
That LinkedIn, man, I tell you.
I know.
I was just talking to a girlfriend yesterday, and she was like, okay, explain to me the LinkedIn newsletter. And so I told her, that we're publishing there once a week. And she goes, but are you generating business from it? And I'm like, yes. And the thing about it is, it's people on LinkedIn that don't subscribe to the blog or follow us on other social networks. They're prospects and they're business leaders, but they're not there's not an overlap.
Right.
And so for us, it's been huge because that's where, you know, the business leader prospect is coming from versus the PR communications leader prospect.
Yeah, and that's I mean, I had somebody call me and they had seen like they were trying to find somebody to take over an account for them because they were gonna retire. And they saw me post and then they went back another day and I posted again and so then they got in touch with me. But I mean, like if I wasn't active on there, they might not have known about me or, even
Right,
though I
right.
have a website
Absolutely.
and
Yeah.
I do other things. Like not everybody knows or pays
Yeah.
attention to every single thing. So you have
Yeah.
to have all these different
Yes.
ways to reach people. And I
Yes.
think for us, I mean, I'd say LinkedIn is a big one. Even though I
You
don't
know, one
always
of the things I think you do really well on LinkedIn, I think actually I take that back. You do two things really well on LinkedIn. You talk about what kind of work you do so that people know how they can hire you, and you do it in a non-schmarmy, salesy way. You do it really well. And the other thing you do really well is you showcase your expertise by saying, like, this is not an example you used, but I can't think of one right now, but something like, if you're going to write a news release, these are 12 things that you should include. And you're just like, boom, 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 boom. And so you do a nice job of like condensing content into 500 words or so, or even less. You do a really nice job with those two things. Every time I see you talk about how someone can hire you, I'm like, dang, that's good. It's good.
Oh, thank you. Well, I
Yeah.
mean, I've been doing this a long time too, and so,
Right.
you're always learning things and trying. You're just trying things. You constantly are trying things, and I mean, I
Yep.
encourage that for clients too, and sometimes I look at myself as a guinea pig. I mean, they're not all trying to do the same things, but I mean, like, on social and things, it's like, well, is this gonna work? Like, and with video even, I really was reluctant to do video for a long time, and so that's a way for me to kinda get out there and reach a different audience because I had a YouTube channel, but there wasn't anything on it. So,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I was not following my own advice there, so
Right. Right. Right.
so
Yeah, you're
this
doing a
is
very nice job.
my attempt, to try some new
To do.
things.
I love it. I love
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
How
and,
many episodes are you in here?
I think let's see, I'm gonna count, maybe 6?
That's great.
I'm trying to do about 2 a month.
That's
So,
great.
I'm not trying to go crazy. Another person I wanna have on that I just wrote down that popped into my head is Peter Shankman because
Oh yeah, with
he's
his new.
revived
Yep.
Paro with
Yep.
Hero. So, I need to, reach out to Peter and see if he'd come on and chat a little bit about that. But yeah, if you have ideas, I'm always open because I am only gonna have people on that I really, like, respect and
Okay,
think
I'll
are
send you
not gonna
some.
steer people wrong, right? Because there's a lot of people that we could also talk about that all day, but there's all kinds of scams and, people trying to, sell themselves as experts and they're not. So always, like,
Uh-huh.
do your research on that and,
Yeah.
look into
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
for the audience. I know but somebody must be buying into that stuff, but anyway.
Someone must is right.
I wanna thank you so much, Jenny, and,
You're very
thanks
welcome.
everybody for being
Thanks
here,
for
and
having me.
yeah, and we'll see each other around,
We will for
and
sure.
yeah, I'll be back with another, episode of PR Explored soon, so thanks so much.